also it could create a development environment, Rust cargo, Rust analyzer, all the C libraries that are required for building the crates, again, without you having to do like brew install, whatever. So Nix provides that experience. It's a twofold approach. It gives you a reproducible package that you can deploy to your web servers, run the binary directly, and it can also reproduce the development environment as is without any differences. So it's universal. Nix is kind of universal that I use in multiple ecosystem, Haskell, Haskell, Julia, Rust, or whatever. So it's always something I go for whenever I pick a tech.
Yeah. You should be mostly good to go as long as there's like Nix stuff for Rust, I would think.
Yeah, I think it should be doable.
Oh yeah, we have a NixOS install script on the awesome site. Here,
Oh, you have CLI, right? The one difference with the leptos is that there is a DX CLI. That's interesting. So this is like cargo leptos. Does it compare to cargo leptos, the DX CLI?
Yeah, DX. We use instead of like cargo Dioxus, we do just DX. It's not a cargo subcommand.
Okay.
Which I don't know. I don't know if there is a difference. Maybe it's like the same difference, probably.
Yeah, it should be pretty similar to Dioxus. It's just with Leptos, they just use trunk instead. So instead of trunk, they use DX.
Oh, they go through trunk. Does that require trunk to be installed?
For SPA, I think they used trunk, and then for full stack, they have a Leptos CLI.
Yeah, we use WASM Bindgen CLI support directly. Like that's a library. Yeah, you don't need trunk. I haven't built a Cargo Leptos app before, or like served it yet. Yeah.
On the note of command line utilities, how does the Rust ecosystem do, like, so you globally install it, right? But then you also have, whatever version of Dioxus or whatever in your project. How do people typically try to keep those in sync in the Rust world?
They don't, and it's bad. Hold on. We have a public roadmap with a wish list on it. If you want to work on this, let me share this real quick. We desperately, well, I don't know if we desperately, but we really want per project, like command line compatibility. So you have a 0.3 project and a 0.4 project. Today, if you upgrade, oh yeah, Evan shared it. Yeah, today, if you use the current CLI on the old version of Dioxus, things probably won't work, which sucks.
Yeah.
What we really want is a common front end that you don't necessarily need to update, and then like the back end of the CLI is dynamically switched based on the version of Dioxus that the project is using, which is totally possible.
Yeah. Are you imagining that would be like you install Dioxus CLI in your project and then the one that's installed globally is just a shim or something different?
Yeah, exactly. It would be like a very tiny little CLI that tries to figure out the project that you're in, match the version, and then shell out to the right driver, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's not a good way, and at least WASMPack tells you that it's like out of date. We don't do that. Which, if you're interested in working on CLIs, that would be nice.
All right, I will put it on my list of maybes.
The DX check stuff is so cool. What Evan was showing me that you use like the visitor pattern, and I was like, oh, you could do that for macros. I think we rewrote our macro stuff based on like the stuff you did with the DX check.
Oh, nice. That's cool. Yeah, I did a lot of work in like I'm new to it in Rust, but I did a lot of work on similar things in JavaScript and TypeScript, like writing transpilers and things like that. So I'm pretty familiar with that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I was definitely blown away. It was very good PR, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Is there a roadmap for the CLI backend?
I think Evan posted the link to the Notion that we have going. Nothing specific. We didn't tag our wish list, but there are a bunch of stuff related to the CLI on the wish list. It's like, we hope to wake up one day, Christmas present, where like DX deploy exists, or benchmarks are ran on every PR. There's a section on that Notion doc that has everything, and then kind of like roughly what we're going for the next version of Dioxus.
Oh, I just saw that Playwright is mentioned in the roadmap, which is for end-to-end testing, right? So that's the framework you're going with, rather than something in Rust.
Someone came out with something yesterday. Did you see that, Evan? Sweet.
I didn't see Sweet. I have seen a couple other alternatives in Rust that we could potentially use. I just chose Playwright when I wrote full end-to-end tests in the main repo. There were really good docs for it. But potentially if I get something working in Rust, that would be better.
There is something called 34 I came across.
Oh yeah, I use 34.
Is this in Flunium that you use it?
I think so, yeah. 34 or something. No, Chrome driver. We don't want 34 because it uses Cinium or whatever headless browser that you need to install. I looked at 34.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one. Or Chrome Oxide or something.
We're
this
just using
version-
regular Playwright, right? Like not Playwright Rust.
Yeah, right now we're just using regular Playwright. We want something that doesn't have a install setup if we can, which Chrome Oxide doesn't.
Wait, how does Playwright help with that?
Playwright just does all the install stuff for you.
Okay, so it basically has an installer that includes all the dependencies that you can use, rather than having to install the dependencies yourself one by one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the main benefit.
Yeah, I mean, if we could get it in Rust, that would be even better, because then you wouldn't have to install like npm and that whole ecosystem.
Okay. In our project, I am inclined towards using one of those Rust tools because I'm using Nix. Installation is not much of. Probably going with 34.
Speaking of not installing npm, I was looking around to see, like, is there a Tailwind thing written in Rust? And I saw a crate for it that I think you published, but is just a placeholder.
Yes. I'm surprised you found that. Yeah, I did publish a thing that is just a placeholder. There is a someone picked up off that. I don't know if they use my code, but someone did implement Tailwind in Rust. What, Railwind CSS, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
We
We need
had it.
something that collects it throughout crates, like some sort of unified asset solution. I just linked in chat. It was an issue I opened a few days ago. Because otherwise, like the existing Tailwind setup won't work for libraries.
Yeah, because we really want to build a component library that uses Tailwind, but the issue with that is like it needs to bring in its own CSS, and we have no way of collecting its CSS into the final bundle. There are ways to do it, but we don't have a design for it yet. Yeah, Link Me would have to do it, but that wouldn't work on desktop.
It wouldn't work on web. It would work on desktop. For web, we need to do something like what Lots of MindGen does, where we insert debug sections and then pull them out with a CLI. We can get it working. It's going to be a project.
Yeah, this whole thing is going to be a huge project.
Potentially, if we could do that though, we can include tailwinds in the CLI with Railwind or something, and then you wouldn't need to install anything extra.
Yeah, that'd be nice. And be able to watch like external files as well in the CLI. There's a bunch of little things in the CLI that like little pain points that could use fixing. I don't know if they're all documented, but they exist. Oh, Raphael, yeah, the question about like why Rust frameworks don't just use UTF-16. I don't know. We would need a new string type, wouldn't we? And can we convert directly? Actually, yeah.
Yeah,
Could
we would need a
just
new
use,
string type. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, could we use UTF-16 on the web implementation?
You'd need a new string type, and then it wouldn't be compatible with normal strings, or you need to like convert it. And that's not really where the overhead comes in. So the tool that Dioxus uses under the hood is the Chamber bindgen. That passes a flag that checks whether the string is ASCII. And if it's ASCII, it can do a more efficient version. I think even if it was UTF-16, JavaScript doesn't expose the methods that would make it faster to convert. It wouldn't really help us. If JavaScript has like interface types, that would help, but otherwise it doesn't.
When are those going to ship? Any other questions? Like things related to roadmap or like problems you guys are running into with your apps? Yeah, does Leptos do the string interning that we do? Maybe?
They do static string interning with WAS and bindgen, but uh, they don't use sledgehammer, so they don't do like collapsing strings and then converting just the one string and splitting it apart. And they don't do any dynamic string interning either, I think.
Do we do dynamic string interning?
Yes, there's a 255 size cache for some things. I think everything is dynamically interned for elements because it was, I don't need to compile stuff. It was fast enough. Yeah, Mark, a way to disable checkpoints would be very nice. I think mainly for loops, there are some cases where it's okay to use that. If you loop exactly 5 times every time, it's technically valid, but it will get linted.
When is you guys trying to loop over a hook 5 times? Oh, well, I don't know. What's the conditional there? Is it a compile time conditional or is it uh, a not compile time conditional?
I don't think that's valid because theme could update.
Yeah, I would just put in use init theme like uh, the conditional like in the hook that provides like a different theme. Yeah, if they're the well, I guess technically they're the same theme, but there's a lot of things that's like technically allowed with hooks, but not really. You shouldn't. But we don't do the things that React does where we recheck slots and run your components twice. Like we're trying to be very transparent with the runtime. Like you can tap into it and it's clear how it works. Ideally, no runtime at the end of the day, but you know, there's got to be a little one.
Someone was talking about a Dioxus init command, which sets up features for all of the targets you want. We have a Dioxus create command that sets up some things. Currently, you can only choose one target, but we would love to add support for multiple targets in the future. It also has support for the router and Tailwind now.
Guess this isn't really new information for most others, but I don't really know much about the other like maintainers' backgrounds and like what y'all are doing. Would be curious to hear some of that.
Well, I do this for a living now, so this is currently my background. I was at Cloudflare before this. They have a product called Warp, like 1.1.1. I don't know if you've heard of it. Um, Here, I'll send it. They do DNS over HTTPS, so it's security VPN. I don't think it's like the best product at Cloudflare. uh, it's hard to ship desktop software, but yeah, a big part of it was like building cross-platform VPN, enterprise VPN software, which is cool. It's not the most entertaining thing to do, but it was still cool work. What did I do before that? Put camera equipment on tower cranes. That was a startup, and then I built like a simulation engine. But the company that does that no longer does that as their primary thing. This is a previous company. Evan, what are you working on? Is it Flonium, your main side project at the moment?
Yeah, main side project is Floatium. It's like an AI graph editor thing. a couple other side projects before that, but nothing that really took off. I guess Sledgehammer, kind of.
Sony
Cool.
has a website. Do you want some help with CSS? I mean, I'm not one to speak. If you look at Dioxus Labs on mobile right now, it's goofy looking.
Oh, I haven't tried Palladium with a mobile. That's terrible. Oof. Those images do not scale right. Yeah, a lot of gradients going on.
You know, it's charming, I think, in a certain kind of way. We got to make sure all the websites that publicly use Dioxus are beautiful. I think we need a designer. We'll get you a designer for funny.
Yeah, we need like if you use Dioxus, part of the terms and conditions is your website has to look nice. We hired somebody to go around look at all the websites.
That's
The
good.
Rust
Yeah.
Foundation drama all over again.
Oh, Doge is beating Mark. Is this an STD or is this on the main repo?
Both the doc site and the main repo, Doge and Mark, the commits are really close. Doge is beating by 1 on the doc site and 2 on the main repo.
I like it. Keep racing. Keep racing. More features. Yes. When do we pivot into Web3? We're gonna do some blockchain anytime soon. Evan, what do you think?
We got to do like decentralized bundle splitting.
Oh, man.
Different parts of the website come from different.
Yeah, no servers at all.
Yeah, and you link binaries at runtime. So it's like different dynamic libraries. You don't have to trust your libraries anymore because it's all WebAssembly.
Yeah.
So I guess to continue that question, uh, those of you who have done a lot of coding, why did you get into it? Is there a project that you're working on that use Dioxus, or you just think it's cool?
I tried. Okay, hold on. I find this funny. I think the first first repo I ever made on GitHub, or at least the first Rust one, was like a web thing 4 years ago. I gotta scroll back all the way to my last page. Oh, it's gonna take a while, I think. It was like this graph editor thing I wanted to build, which is funny because that's now what Evan's working on. Joins. Yeah, a graph editor in U 4 years ago. Yeah, this is like the first thing. And I was like, you know what? U kind of sucks. I wanted to like do hooks, and they didn't exist. All I knew was React hooks at the time. What was I doing? Block-based state management, where each element holds references to a parent. Several different models were possible. I have no clue what I was doing, but the code is here. I wrote stuff. It doesn't do anything. Okay, that's great. Yes, no, but yeah. I don't know if Rust format existed back then.
I saw. I also tried you. I didn't like it. And I saw the release announcement for Dioxus, and I noticed they had a terminal editor, which I didn't know you could do at the time. Then when I tried it, it didn't like not all the things were implemented. So I just started working on that. I didn't know React at the time, so I worked in the terminal editor, and then eventually did the web editor and built some apps with that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people come in, they don't know React. Maybe that's like kind of a negative here. It's like we're trying to be React, and everybody's like, we don't know what React is.
I've done React for 4 years or so at this point, so I know it pretty well.
Do you think things map well from React into Dioxus? Is it like somewhat straightforward, or are things still confusing?
I mean, I've been trying to reach for, I'm unsure which hooks to reach for and like when to use them. Like I historically have used effects and used callback a fair amount, but so far, I mean, admitted in my very tiny, like 2 days old Dioxus apps, I haven't really used those, and instead I've used like use coroutine, which doesn't exist, and use future, which also doesn't exist in React. So kinda, I mean, use state is the obvious one, and that mostly maps. So
Yeah,
it's close enough.
I I feel like as developers on Dioxus, I think both of us hate use state. I don't know. It doesn't map well. Use ref is interesting. I think the signal stuff's gonna be better. I don't know. Evan probably has his own opinions.
Yes, I agree. I think it kind of with Dioxus you can almost get like away from setters and getters, but use state kind of breaks that because you still have stale value. Just by like use ref better, but signals are going to be way better than that. I'm going to try to get an issue out today for the signal stuff,
Oh,
so I have something more concrete to point to. We've been talking about this for a while. But
The only thing I've seen that does signals in a React-ish way is Preact has that. Have you seen that?
yeah, but what is the general consensus on preact signals? I feel like people think it's a gimmick, right? Is it?
Honestly, I
Or is
don't know.
it good? Is it good?
I tried it in a kind of toy app and it seemed fine, but I never really got that deep into it.
That's kind of the challenge here is like, do we stray away from React to make Dioxus better? Or do we just stay closer to React so people who know React have something to like adopt that they understand? It's kind of been the balance so far, and I think we're starting to like stray farther and farther away from React, for better or for worse.
And I think that's okay. Like, even though the hooks and like the actual names of the hooks and exactly what they do are a bit different, the rules of hooks are more or less the same. And I think that's the main difference or between like the post hooks world of React and the pre-hooks world of React. So I think it's okay if you stray but maintain that, or you could eventually choose to completely move away from that, and that's fine as long as you're not then trying to compare yourself to React.
Yeah, React inspired. It's probably the yeah, that does make sense to change marketing. I feel like there are things about React we don't like or like want to get rid of. Things like use effects, if possible, or like people abusing use effects. And then like state management kind of doesn't map perfectly into Rust. But I think React inspired is probably fine. Hooks, context, and then components are like the main React paradigms that we're kind of pulling.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Some of the new signal stuff that's coming out will be interesting. We've been talking about it. You can do implicit subscribes. So like Fermi right now, you have to use read, use write, use set. There's all these like hooks that you have to do to grab down like global data. But in theory, you shouldn't have to do that, especially when you go to like, format an atom or whatever, like a value into your text. That should be able to like, dynamically reach up into the tree, pull that value down without having to do anything explicit. Oh, Evan's fun diagram. Yeah. So we're kind of thinking this like new approach will be a lot cleaner, especially for big global apps. Um, I don't know. I want to put it out, see if we can get it in the current release cycle without having to push a new major version of Dioxus.
Two different things. There's the signals, which is like what John was talking about there, which is really nice for like, automatically subscribing these stuff and making things slightly more performant by default. Then there's also like state's going to be copy. So you should be able to use state in futures without cloning into it every time, which should fix a lot of lifetime errors.
I would have appreciated that yesterday.
Yeah, calling a event handler inside of a future, really difficult in the current version. That should be a lot easier in the future. So Dioxys is kind of like React. Next.js would be more like full stack. Full stack is kind of like our meta framework thing. To make a full stack Dioxys, you just use the Dioxys full stack crate. And you wait a little bit so that we add more stuff on top of that. But you can't use it now. That can also be used with desktop, which is uses something like what Tower uses under the hood. It's called Rye, made by the Tower team.
One thing, even with basically a toy app that I was building yesterday, I found myself missing was React Query. I don't know if anybody has used that. But basically a way to say like, I have this component needs access to this resource, and so I just have a hook that says, I want stuff from this URL, and I can configure like how stale, like how long it takes for it to be stale, and maybe a refresh interval and things like that. We use that a lot in our TypeScript React apps, and I'm not sure I don't know if it would make sense to necessarily do the same thing in Dioxys, or if something more from like growing from server functions would be better. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Evan, what do you think? You've been working on all this stuff more.
Yeah, I'm like browsing through the React query docs now. Yes, basically. Yeah, there's a lot of like utility hooks we can build up around full stack development we don't have. So something like a fetch hook that query seems to be would be really nice. I think we actually have it in our docs site. It just isn't built yet. Um, yeah, it probably should integrate somewhat with full stack. because full stack includes suspense and we want it to be compatible with that. Then there's some different ideas me and John were talking about for how this would look like with if your backend was managed by Dioxus as well. Potentially you could have like a React query that was smarter. So instead of pulling every n seconds or something, you could pass a signal or a state from your client to your server. Then you have a WebSocket connection that tells your client to refresh whenever the server changes like a specific row in your database.
Yeah, React query is all about like you're unpacking the ongoing query, right? And you can like invalidate it and does suspense and stuff like that. Oh, SSR. Should we put that on the roadmap? Like a better query, right?
Yes, we need like a query wrapper, just generally a wrapper for some sort of database thing.
Access query. Does it do database stuff, or do you need something like Prisma or whatever, like one of the ORMs?
React query by itself doesn't have any like backend stuff. I'm sure there are other things that deal with that, but our stack is a little bit non-standard in that regard. Like everybody these days seems to be using like Next.js and things like that that integrate front end and back end, but ours are pretty separate.
Is the tooling there good? Do you guys have like a client that?
We built our own thing. I
Yeah.
can show it to you since it's open source. But yeah, it's basically just like you define a TypeScript interface that you implement as like async functions, and then you can automatically generate a client that uses JS proxies to make requests to the server.
Interesting. And there's a Rust client that you guys built?
No, all of this is just TypeScript. I'm like I said, the Rust stuff I'm working on is for a prototype and very new.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, when I saw the 4.4 blog post, I was like, oh, server functions, that would be nice. But I mean, I can rewrite, but I have some basic server stuff in Rust with Rocket, and that's not on the list, but it's okay.
It would be interesting to export like a Rocket client from your code. I don't know if you can the client with the types and stuff exported. I don't know if Rocket does that these days. There's some crates that do it. What is it? Salvo has open API support, and I think you can spit out like a client for WASM.
Somehow Rocket is collecting endpoints because they have an attribute on a function, then you can launch your server, right? So they're doing something already kind of like full stack. I wonder if you could just hook into that.
You have to manually mount the routes, but maybe things have changed
Uh,
since I looked at it 6 months ago. Maybe everyone's abusing link me these days.
The way it works now is you're basically like you annotate the functions and I like create a routes.rs file and I export those and then import you know, and then manually have them in a routes I don't know, macro of some sort that you pass to the main builder.
Are we becoming to? We're aiming to become like a remix, FN? Yes, no, stealing, borrowing.
kind of. We were looking at like the remix homepage. What I used to explain like we directly stole like their visualization for nests or layouts, right? Yeah. So the Dioxus router is inspired by Remix in that sense. We want to be more type safe than Remix. So like our router is all enums. I think that's one of the strong, one of the strengths of Rust is type safety that some of these JavaScript tools aren't as good at. The main difference between what Remix does and the goals of Remix and Dioxus is we're cross-platform. That influences some of the design decisions. So something like an islands architecture or rack server components don't make as much sense for cross-platform than it does if you're just targeting JavaScript in the web. But we do kind of want to be full stack like Remix.
I love layouts. I did not get them. It took like an hour, 3 hours for Evan to explain them to me, and then they clicked, and I was like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever.
Flownum actually is kind of influencing some of the Signal stuff. Because of how Signals work with subscriptions, it makes it a lot easier to do like graph structures because I want everything to be in like a centralized store so I can serialize stuff, serialize like the graph you are currently building, which means that like in the current system, it's just terrible performance, which is why I wrote it in Ego8 first. Now I'm porting it to Dioxus and it works a lot better with the new local subscription Signal stuff.
All right. Anybody have any last questions before we wrap up? Anything pressing? Okay. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Office Hours. We might slow down the cadence of these, maybe not every week, maybe like every other week or once a month or something. Yes, Dioxus will say the word. But yeah, thank you for showing up to this one.
Thank you.
All right, see you guys.